Monsters coming down the hall. Spires cover all the walls. Serial killer is on the line. Wants to know if you have the time. Aliens are landing soon. This will mean certain doom. A chainsaw sputters and comes alive. Blood and death are close behind. One thing you can be certain of, the zombies just can't get enough. Just one more bite is all they want. The ghosts downstairs are on the hunt. The Shade Chronicles are keeping score. That's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one, so you don't miss all the fun.
Welcome to the Shade Chronicles, an anthology-style podcast featuring short works of fiction and serial prose, specifically with a sci-fi and horror flavor. Your hosts for the podcast are Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey.
Hi, this is Leftridge.
Hi, this is Lawrence Trokey, and thank you for spending your time with us. Let's get started with our first story.
The Shade Chronicles are keeping score. That's what all the writing's for. They record their stories one by one, so you don't miss all the fun.
You better watch out, you better not lie. You better step right, or you're gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus. His boys are packing, and that's no lie. They'll mess you up if you step out of line. Don't mess with Santa Claus. He knows where you're sleeping. He knows what you take. He knows you've been bad, so there's no excuse you can make. You better watch out, you better not lie. You better step right, or you're gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus. And that's no lie. They'll mess you up if you step out of line. Don't mess with Santa Claus. You better watch out, you better not lie. You better step right, or you're gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus. You better watch out, you better not lie. You better step right, or you're gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus. He knows where you're sleeping. He knows what you take. He knows you've been bad, so there's no excuse you can make.
You Better Watch Out, a Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey joint. Carl sat at the edge of the bar and sipped a vodka and soda, desperately trying to forget the shitstorm his life turned out to be. He wore a dirty Santa Claus costume, complete with hat and fake beard, which was off his face and hanging down by the strap around his neck. He was about 4 drinks into his attempt to escape reality, and the buzz from the alcohol was just starting to take the edge off of things. In front of him on the bar sat a red metal bucket, the kind used to collect donations during the holiday season by recovering addicts dressed as Santa who were working for various charities. The only charity Carl gave a shit about was himself. He knew he could pick up some quick cash this time of year by digging out the Santa gear and finding a busy corner downtown. He would work for a couple of hours and make enough to either lose it all gambling or to buy him enough booze to drink away his problems. Then he would drag his sorry ass back to Lola's apartment and beg her to let him sleep on her couch. She usually gave in, and sometimes they'd even have sex if Lola was feeling down enough and Carl wasn't too wasted. Tonight's score wasn't nearly what Carl hoped for. It was Christmas Eve, and he thought the people inclined to give him donations would really step it up tonight. He figured some would feel guilty about spending too much on their kids, or they felt stupid about all the drunk shit they pulled at the company Christmas party and would stuff an extra 50 or more into the kettle to make amends. It was good for karma, right? Instead, the selfish bastards were being stingy for some reason, so his collection efforts suffered. So, he slumped on his bar stool and tried to forget about all the money he owed Jimmy Two Toes, the local loan shark and mobster who ran the illegal gambling tables Carl lost at most nights. Was it over 10 grand now? He wondered. Had to be at least that. Christ, he was fucked. Just then he felt a slap on his shoulder, and the hand that slapped him lingered there. Well, look who it is, boys and girls. It's Santa. It must be a Christmas miracle, a voice behind Carl announced in a smart-ass kind of way. Carl raised his hand and said, "Look, buddy, I'm off duty now, so would you mind fucking off?" The hand tightened on his shoulder and spun him around on the stool to face its owner. It was Jimmy fucking Two Toes. Shit. "Santa, don't you want to hear what I want for Christmas? I've been a real good boy this year." Jimmy smiled at Carl. Then his face hardened and he said, "I want my fucking money, you jabroni." "Look, Jimmy, I have been busting my ass trying to get it for you. I just need more time." Carl tried to keep his voice down while pleading with Jimmy, even though the bar was almost deserted except for the goon squad that came in with Jimmy. "Tell you what, Santa, you got till midnight tonight to get me what you owe me. After that, I'm going to mount your jingle bells to the front of my caddy, you hear me, you fucking lush?" Yeah, loud and clear," Carl acknowledged. "Good, and don't try running off to the North Pole or some shit, 'cause I will find you." Jimmy pointed at him as he was turning to leave. The goons fell in behind Jimmy and they all left the bar. Carl paid his tab, picked up his empty kettle, and slumped out the bar by way of the back exit. He didn't want to run into Jimmy again if he was still hanging out in front of the place. The exit led to an alleyway that was dark and wet from the light mist that had been falling all day. Every surface glistened with moisture and was cold and damp. Carl felt the same way. Then behind him, Carl heard a tinkling sound. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded more musical, like the jingling of bells. Was there another corner Santa collecting nearby? The nerve of the asshole thinking he could take over his territory, Carl thought. Ready to dick punch his competition, Carl rounded the corner of the building where the noise was coming from in a huff. He stopped cold in his tracks when he saw the sleigh and reindeer sitting in the middle of the alleyway. For a moment, he thought he was drunk and seeing things. But honest to Christ, it was a real sleigh, and damned if it did not have exactly 8 reindeer hitched to it. Boy, whoever this dude was trying to beat his time, he was overselling it, in Carl's opinion. Carl walked over to the sleigh, trying not to disturb the animals, and looked inside. There was a big green velvet bag stuffed full with something. Carl figured it was the guy's laundry in there to make it look like Santa's bag. Curious, he opened it and nearly shit his pants. The bag had dozens and dozens of wrapped presents of various sizes. So many, in fact, Carl couldn't see the bottom of the bag. He figured this guy was going to take this bag to some orphanage or shelter and really do it up big. Santa saves Christmas and shit like that, he thought. Carl made a quick calculation and figured he could fence the gifts and make a couple of grand at least. He could bring the cash to Jimmy Two Toes tonight and hope to get him off his ass for a few days. This bag really could save his bacon. "Son of a bitch!" someone shouted nearby, and Carl freaked out. He jumped into the sleigh and ducked down to hide from the other Santa, which he figured had seen him in his stuff. After a second, he peeked over the side rail and saw the other Santa, but he wasn't coming to the sleigh. He had his right hand against the alleyway wall, and the other hand, presumably from his posture, was holding his member while he was trying to take a leak. "Goddamn prostate, come on, I've got a schedule to keep." The other Santa rebuked his penis for not performing up to standards. Carl smiled. Served the dude right for working Carl's street. He went back to the bag and tried to throw it over his shoulder, but it was too heavy. Instead, he lost his grip on it and fell back on the bench in the sleigh. At that moment, the reindeer all stood at attention. They must have thought their Santa had returned to the sleigh and was ready to go. The sleigh lurched as the reindeer pulled hard against their reins. Suddenly, the sleigh was moving fast. Carl had fallen down on the floor of the sleigh when it lurched. He crawled up to the bench again, fighting against centrifugal force. When he was upright, his mouth dropped. The sleigh and reindeer were shooting into the sky, just clearing the nearby building rooftops. The other Santa turned his head at the sound of his sleigh moving.
"Ho, ho, holy shit!"
he exclaimed at the sight of it racing down the alleyway and flying into the sky. Carl freaked out. He sat rigid on the sleigh bench with his hand dug into the leather-padded seat. His eyes squinted as the frigid winter air blasted his face. the wash of the flying reindeer and sleigh blowing back at him. He spotted what he thought were the reins that should control the reindeer, grabbed them and held fast. He leaned back and pulled on the reins, which made the reindeer slow down. Soon they were gently gliding at a much slower pace above the wet streets below. Carl felt more in control and started to investigate the inside of the sleigh to see if he could figure out how to land it. He noticed a tablet mounted to the front rail of the sleigh and tapped it with his finger. It lit up and Carl realized it was a navigation system like he had on his phone. He tapped the search field and a digital keyboard appeared. He typed in the address of Lola's apartment and hit go. He noticed the lead reindeer's antlers glowed a bright red for a second. Then the sleigh lurched to the left as the team of reindeer pushed on to the destination Carl had set in the navigation. He felt like he might survive this sleigh ride after all. The sleigh landed smoothly on the roof of Lola's apartment building. Carl set the brake which he found on the way to Lola's. After landing, he grabbed the big green bag and started to rummage around in it. He found a gift-wrapped jewelry box and stuffed it in the pocket of his robe. He jumped out of the sleigh and ran over to the fire escape that ran alongside the building. He trotted down the metal stairs, slipping once due to the cheap Santa boots that came with the costume. He regained his footing and made it to one of the windows of Lola's apartment. He peeked inside and saw Lola sitting on the couch watching a Christmas movie on the TV. She was wearing her robe and looked like she was getting ready to turn in for the night. He tried the window, but it was locked, so he gently tapped on the glass. He saw her head spin towards the window. She was shocked to see someone dressed as Santa looking in her window. She started to reach for the pistol she kept in the stand next to the couch when she heard Carl shout at her through the window, "Lola, it's me, Carl!" She put the gun down and went to the window, holding her robe closed around her. "What the fuck, Carl? What are you doing on the fire escape?" She unlatched the window lock and let Carl in the apartment. "Look, I can explain, but first I came here to give you this." He produced the box from his pocket. She looked at the box at first and smirked. "Some cheap dime store necklace won't fix things up with me, Carl." "Lola, please, just open it." He smiled at her and offered the box to her. She took it and opened it. Inside, there was a ring box from a local jewelry store that she had known about, but never been to since it was way out of her price range. Her hands started to shake as she opened the box to reveal a 3-carat princess-cut diamond ring that would easily go for over $20K. She almost dropped the ring at the same time her mouth dropped. Where did you get this?" She had trouble speaking at the moment. "What does that matter? It's yours, baby, and there's more from where that came from. I just scored big time, the score of a lifetime." Carl was almost giddy as he explained himself. "Carl, this is big-time trouble. You don't fuck with someone who has this kind of ice and just walk away." "Don't worry, baby. I got a plan. I'm going to square things with Jimmy Two Toes, and then you and me are going to put this town in our rear view and not look back. We'll be headed to sunnier places to set up for our retirement." Carl tried to reassure her. He reached out to her and touched her arm, but she pulled away. "I don't know, Carl. This is way too much to deal with," she said, worried about what was going on. "Look, you stay here and I'll be back in an hour or so. I'm going to go see Jimmy and then I'm coming back for you. Pack a bag for whatever you want to take, but only the stuff you really want. The rest of this shit can rot here for all I care. I'm going to get you all new stuff." He leaned over and kissed her on her cheek. He opened the window and climbed out onto the fire escape. "Why do you have to use the fire escape to leave?" she asked. "My ride is on the roof," he said and smiled at her. Then he climbed the stairs. She watched him go and disappear onto the roof. After a minute, she saw something fly off the roof at an incredible speed. It was all a blur in the wet and foggy air, but she thought she heard sleigh bells. Carl abruptly lands the sleigh on the roof of a large warehouse and gently comes to a stop. The sound of reindeer hooves clomp and then go silent. From a door leading to the roof, 4 of Jimmy's men quickly advance on Carl and the sleigh. They suddenly stop about 8 feet away and start laughing when they realize what they are seeing. Carl jumps from the sleigh onto the roof and holds his hands up as he looks at the armed men laughing at him while waving their weapons. The only man who could catch his breath and stop laughing says, "Did you get a promotion from ringing your bell, dude?" Carl, lowering his hands, responds, "Look, I know this looks ridiculous, but this is actually Santa Claus's sleigh. I boosted it off Santa when I left the bar. Once I figured it out, I flew in it and landed here to give Jimmy the money I owe, and then I will disappear forever. I promise." Suddenly, from behind the four men who have recovered from their laughter, a deep voice announces,
Everyone step aside. I need to speak to Carl.
Jimmy Two Toes walks past his gunmen and up to Carl. Jimmy points to Carl's hands with his left hand, holding a smoldering cigar, and says, "Please put down your hands." Carl obeys and says, "I have your money and with interest right here." Carl pulls out 2 large stacks of cash from the large green bag on the sleigh and then hands it to Jimmy. Jimmy takes it and says, "Okay, let's all go inside for a minute." Jimmy ushers Carl to the rooftop access door. As they all walk down the steps and finally into the warehouse, Carl asks anxiously, "We are all even now, right, Jimmy?" Jimmy takes a drag off his cigar and says, "Almost." He walks over to a wood crate and sits on the edge of it facing Carl. Then he smiles and adds, "To forget the time and effort I had to put into waiting for this payback, I think you should give me that fancy sleigh you got here on. That should make us square." Carl is shocked. He never considered that Jimmy would want the sleigh. He should have been more careful and hid it before coming to see Jimmy, instead of making a big show about it and landing on the roof in front of him and his goons. Now what can he do? Jimmy will take the sleigh from him, and all the promises he made, Lola will be ruined. He struggled for what to say next. But before Carl can say anything, a booming voice from the shadows proclaims,
Well, that is not going to happen.
Attention, Shade Chronicle podcast listeners. The merchandise store is now open. You can find the merchandise store on the merchandise tab on the Shade Chronicles website, which is at theshadechronicles.com. Find premium t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, travel mugs, ball caps, and more at the Shade Chronicles podcast merchandise store. We now resume your regular programming.
Santa Claus steps out of the darkness, and flanking him on both sides are others who appear to be elves. Santa continues,
The sleigh is not Carl's to give, and you're sure as shit not worthy of having it, my friend.
One of the gunmen snickers and says, "Oh, you brought your little elves, didn't ya, cosplay Santa?" Santa responds,
I am the original deal, bitch. And do you not understand that I need protection with all the sketchy places I have to go and all the people I have to deal with when sneaking into their homes late at night? These little bastards are my muscle, which you are about to learn the hard way.
As the threat lands, Jimmy and his gunmen draw weapons on Santa, the elves, and Carl with a simultaneous click of the hammers on their guns. Jimmy announces, "It looks like you are not in a position to make any demands, and I will take what I want. Now beat it before it becomes a blue Christmas, you fat fuck." The next moment, one of the gunmen yelps as objects slam into each of his eyes, causing him to fall back onto the floor. In an attempt to help the fallen man, another goon reaches out to catch him, but misses. When he hits the floor, he looks at him, pauses, and then looks closer and exclaims, "Holy shit! He has candy canes in his eyes!" He checks the fallen gunman for a pulse, then looks up at Jimmy and the others and yells, "Christ, he's dead!" One of the elves to Santa's right says in a high-pitched yet ominous tone,
"That boy died by the peppermint."
The other elves snicker in unison. The goons point their guns in the direction of the group of snickering elves. The one checking on his friend stands up but then stops in his tracks. He looks down and sees that something is on his wrists, and it is causing him pain. It looks to be shiny gold tinsel, but it is cutting into his flesh. The gold begins to seep red, and he says, "What the?" The tinsel starts twisting tighter around his wrists, which causes him to yell out. As the others look to see what he is screaming about, the gunman falls to his knees as the tinsel cuts off both his hands. His gun clanks to the floor. Horrified, Jimmy and the remaining gunmen fire their automatic weapons at Santa. But in a weird tornado of wind and green blur, the elves create a shield by getting on each other's shoulders and connecting arms and legs in front of Santa. The bullets ricochet off the elfin Santa shield with pings and tings. After the clips empty and the smoke clears, the elves part, and Santa walks past them towards the men and opens his white fur-lined red robe, revealing bandolier-style belts crisscrossed on his chest with Christmas tree ornaments attached. He grabs one in each hand and sends them flying toward the men as they reload. One gunman loses his right ear, which had a diamond gem in it, as a little drummer boy ornament flies by his head with sharpened drumsticks that relieve him of it. Then, the second gunman is struck by a nutcracker ornament on his left that pierces his flesh and stings at first, but gets too excruciating because the ornament's mouth begins to move like that of a nutcracker, driving the ornament deeper into the gunman's flesh and muscle. As the two gunmen drop to the warehouse floor from their injuries, Jimmy, stunned and standing between them both, exclaims, "Get up and make this mother!" The rest of Jimmy's rather violent and certainly vulgar, expletive-filled statement is drowned out by the sounds of flesh and bone ripping, popping, and squelching, causing him to cover his eyes momentarily. Jimmy looks left and right at his gunmen, but he sees nothing other than two piles of clothing soaked in blood with a smidge of body parts remaining. He turns in the direction of Santa and finds the elves are all covered in blood, each holding a blade, cleaning off the blood from their weapons and faces. Carl witnesses this development from behind some stacked boxes and decides he needs to get the fuck out of Dodge. He begins to make his way towards the stairs that lead to the roof. Once on the steps, Carl quickly ascends the steps while the sounds of screaming and bone crunching, sprinkled with howls and begging, drift up from the warehouse area. He assumes Jimmy Two Toes has met his final fate at the hands of Santa Claus. After getting to the roof, Carl jumps into the sleigh and grabs the reins, which alert the reindeer he is ready to go. The sleigh moves quickly to the edge of the roof, rises and blasts into the night air as he escapes. As the reindeer glide and soar through the frigid cold air, Carl continues to look side to side and over his shoulder, checking to see if he is being followed. While he was initially only thinking of getting away, he then remembers Lola. He realizes he needs to get in touch with her and have her meet him so they can get out of this town. Reaching into his coat pocket, he locates his cell phone and calls her. Lola answers after the second ring and urgently says, "Hello?" Carl holds the phone close to his ear and says, "Babe, meet me at Cliff Range Park in about 20 minutes. I will be waiting for you. We're getting out of this town." Lola answers saying, "Okay, but the call is suddenly dropped." Carl looks at his phone. It has no signal and is malfunctioning for some reason. He looks up and then sees the drones coming at him, 3 of them from either side of the reindeer with elves apparently riding on top of them. It looks ridiculous and terrifying at the same time. Carl orders the reindeer to dive, and he is thrown back abruptly into the back of the sleigh with the large green sack. He underestimated the power of the reindeer and miscalculated the effect of his command, resulting in him losing his grip on the reins and his seat as well. Carl struggles to get back to the front of the sleigh as it dives faster. Out of the corner of his eye, the drones with the elves are on his tail. He sees they are covered in blood from their hats to their coats and their gloves, the result of the fight at the warehouse, no doubt. He is disturbed and sickened by their appearance. These fucks are nothing like the stories he heard as a kid. The elves were supposed to be jolly and happy beings, but these fiends were demented in their nature, taking great pleasure in their bloody work, hooting and hollering with large, toothy smiles. They are unnerving and horrible. A bolt of fear shoots through Carl at the sight of them approaching the sleigh. They come alongside the reindeer team, and with a few commands Carl can't hear because of the wind, they direct the reindeer to slow their descent and level off before crashing into the ground. They guide the reindeer towards a thick wooded area to the north of a major roadway. As the sleigh comes to a stop, the drones buzz around and quickly surround Carl and the sleigh. He becomes aware of multiple laser scope beams dancing on his chest, putting him in their sights. From the front of the sleigh, a pair of headlights pull into view and illuminate the area. A stretch limousine rolls in front of the sleigh. The backmost door opens and loud music comes blasting out. A beefy subwoofer pounds the beat out and the sound of it is deafening. Santa steps out of the limo, chewing on a well-lit cigar, causing a thick smoke cloud to surround his head like a wreath. It reminded Carl of the line from the poem, "A Visit from St. Nicholas, aka The Night Before Christmas." Only this Santa was not a right jolly old elf, and Carl wasn't laughing at the sight of him. He was pissing his pants, more like it. In Santa's other hand was a crystal tumbler, presumably filled with bourbon on the rocks from the look of the amber-colored liquid inside. Santa walks quickly towards the sleigh, his big black boots crunching heavy in the new fallen snow. After taking a long drag, Santa flicks the cigar to the ground while at the same time taking a gulp of his drink. Then he hurls the glass at a nearby tree and it shatters into a million glistening shards. He exhales the cigar smoke from his nose like an enraged bull and it billows around him. He walks through the thick white smoke snarling in Carl's direction with bloodshot eyes and dilated pupils. Elves pour out of the limo and join the ones from the drones. They start dancing around and some play air guitar to the music from the sound system. The whole scene is bizarre and terrifying. Carl focuses on Santa as he approaches him. He slips out of the sleigh and stands at its side waiting for the impending meeting with Saint Nick. Before he can react, elves sneak up to him and wrap his wrists in tinsel, binding his arms. Santa stops and raises his left white-gloved hand straight into the air above his head. Everything stops.
You have been a naughty boy this year, haven't you, Carl?
Santa says as he steps in close to Carl. Carl can smell his boozy breath because he is so close. Look it. I had no fucking idea who you were back in the alley. I thought you were another schmuck like me trying to collect money for the kettle, and when I thought you were trying to do it on my street corner, I got pissed and was going to say something. Carl tried to explain.
But you took my sleigh, buddy, didn't you?
Santa cocked his head at Carl and gave him a slight smile. No, I mean yes, but not on purpose. These crazy reindeer must have thought I was you and they bolted with me in the back. It wasn't my fault.
You're a bad liar, Carl, and a bad boy too. And you know what happens to bad boys, don't you? They get whipped.
Santa exclaimed, and all the elves gave up a cheer and started dancing again. Santa started to undo his big black belt with its massive metal buckle like he was going to whip Carl with it. He made a show of it for the elves, which only made them jump up and down more. Unfortunately, Santa forgot the belt was also holding his pants up, which immediately fell around his ankles when the belt came completely loose. He looked down at his boxers exposed to the night air and said,
"Oh shit."
Carl used this as his moment to break free. He pulled his left hand with all his strength, and the elf holding on to the tinsel tied to his arm was pulled off his feet. Carl swung him around to collide with the other elf on his right. They slammed into each other with a splat, releasing Carl's arms in the process. He reached over the side rail of the sleigh and grabbed for the big green bag. He got his arms inside and found something to pull out just as Santa was on top of him. Carl swung the object with all his might towards Santa, and it smashed into his face, connecting with his left eye. Santa stumbles back, bent over reaching for his eye. When he raises his face, a toy train engine is sticking to it because the cow catcher is embedded into his eye socket. With one motion, Santa brings up his hand, pulls the toy from his face, points at Carl, and with a distorted and bloody face, resembling more a demon instead of a jolly old elf, starts to say,
"You son of a..."
Just then, another sleigh comes flying down and whooshes past the scene below. Santa looks up, holding his eye.
What the?
The sleigh lands nearby, and a figure emerges from it, walking towards Santa and Carl. Carl can't really make out who it is because the light from the limo headlights is illuminating it from the back, leaving the front of the person in shadow. Santa straightens, then realizes his pants are down and quickly pulls them up and buckles his belt around his large waist. "We got a problem, Santa," the figure says as they approach. Carl's eyes adjust to the light and realizes this is a woman dressed like Santa. Her own hair is as white as Santa's beard, and she is holding a paper scroll which she unrolls and shows to Santa.
God damn it,
Santa exclaims as he puts on reading glasses and examines the scroll.
How is this possible?
Someone loves him, and if anyone truly loves him, he doesn't get on the naughty list. You know that. Mrs. Claus leaned into Santa and said, at almost a whisper, "What the fuck?" Carl says as he watches the two discuss what they were just looking at. "You know the rules. If you go after one of the ones on the list, you have violated your oath, even if by accident. That's why you have to be so careful before you assume someone is on the naughty list. We've talked about this before, dear," Mrs. Claus admonishes Santa over his mistake. Santa looks at Carl in disgust at first and then changes expressions to a more modest countenance.
Carl, apparently we have made a mistake. Somehow, in the name of Christ, your name is actually on the nice list, which means I should not have attacked you just now. I could be in real big trouble if this were to ever get back to the powers that be. I'd like to make you a deal if you promise to keep quiet about this little misunderstanding."
"Wha?" was all Carl was able to say at the moment. Getting impatient with Carl, Santa snapped at him.
"Pull yourself together for fuck's sake, man. Are you going to work with me here or not?"
Carl cleared his throat and then said, "I want a shit ton of cash in the limo. You give me that and I'll keep it on the down low for you, Santa, sure." Santa snorted and then walked over to the sleigh. He reached into the big green bag and brought out a stuffed money bag, like the kind Carl had seen armored truck guys carry in and out of banks. He tossed it over to Carl, and it dropped at his feet with a thud.
"We square?"
Santa asked. "Almost," Carl said, and walked over to the sleigh, reached into the green bag and pulled out another bank sack like the first one, just as stuffed too. And Carl reached out his hand towards Santa. Santa motioned to one of the elves nearby, and an elf trotted up to Carl, snarled at him, and slapped the keys to the limo in his outstretched hand.
Just give me 1 minute with this guy and I'll...
The elf said under his breath and was cut off when Santa smacked him in the back of his head. "Okay, we are all good. Thanks for everything, I guess," Carl said, and then walked away as fast as he could, carrying the 2 heavy sacks of cash. He threw them in the back seat of the limo and walked around to the front and got in the driver's seat. He drove off down the road nearby with Santa, Mrs. Claus, and the elves watching him go. He had to apologize to Lola for failing to meet up with her at Cliff Range Park. She stood near the entrance, shivering in the cold night air. She had packed 2 bags which she brought with her on the bus and carried from the bus stop a couple of blocks away. Failing to heed Carl's advice, she packed them both a little too full of stuff she really didn't need, but felt she shouldn't leave behind. He caught up with her at the bus stop, trying to go back home after waiting for almost 2 hours for Carl to show up. She quickly forgave him when she saw the limo and the bags of cash in the back, though. They drove to a hotel nearby and spent the night there. The next morning, they drove the limo to South Florida and got a condo at a beachside resort in the Keys. After settling in and recovering from the long drive, Carl found a local car lot and traded the luxury limo in for a used Jeep Wrangler with low mileage. He had to throw in a few bucks on top of the trade-in, but was mostly satisfied with the deal he got. After buying the Jeep and paying for some traveling expenses, Carl walked away with just under 10 million bucks. He took the cash in a large duffel bag to a local bank and got a safe deposit box to store the money and keep it safe. He didn't want to deposit it and have the bank report it to the IRS. He thought he could drop by every now and then and take out what he and Lola needed to live off of. If they didn't go nuts and start living like rap music stars, they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Carl and Lola sat in their matching Adirondack chairs on the beach, staring out at the ocean most afternoons. This has been the routine for the past 5 months since Carl and Lola got there, and they were in no hurry to change things. They ended up finding a small house with beach access and negotiated a long-term lease with the landlord, who was only too happy to take rent payments in cash. When the sun would set, Carl and Lola went inside to make dinner for the evening. Carl usually grilled something and Lola made a salad or some other side to go along with the main course. While they were both performing their dinner chores, neither of them noticed the figure who walked out of the surf on the beach in front of their home, where he removed a snorkel and swimming fins. They did not see him walk up the beach in the dark to their front gate. They did not hear the latch of the gate open or hear it close softly behind the figure as he walked to their front door, where he paused on the porch, removed a Nerf-style pistol from a backpack, and attached to it a candy cane-striped device that resembled a noise suppressor, or commonly referred to as a silencer.
Finally got my chance,
the figure said before entering the home.
You better watch out. You better not lie. You better step right, or you gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus. He knows where you sleep, he knows what you take. He knows you've been bad, so there's no excuse you can make. You better watch out. You better not lie. You better step right, or you gonna die. Don't mess with Santa Claus.
Okay, well, that was our final episode of season 2. We are going to be breaking for a little while. However, the special thing about this project, or this
What are we going to break?
We're not going to break anything.
Damn.
We're going to not do the stories for a little while. Take a little break for ourselves.
So the way that normal people say that, just so you know,
Okay.
is that the season has ended.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, so season 2 has officially ended. This was the season finale. That's me celebrating.
This is a little behind the scenes of how fun it was to collaborate with him, which we did in this episode, and it went really well, and I really liked it. But either way,
Yes.
he's still a pain. But anyway, no, it was all good. It all worked out. Kind of your idea, Lawrence, that you had of the story, even though it was going with our theme of having a holiday one at the end of the season. And
yes,
so it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was something that I think we could maybe build off of for even further episodes or something like that in the future. However,
Yes.
What are your opinions of it? Mine, I liked it. I thought it was an enjoyable collaboration, and I do like how it turned out.
You know, I want to say here, I want to bring it down for a minute.
Okay. Oh, here
and
we go.
just say that, I think we learned some very powerful lessons.
Oh no.
In this no, I'm just kidding. We didn't learn shit. We didn't learn a goddamn thing. So I just derailed you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're fine. No. I thought you were going to bring us down to seriousness. I don't want to go there.
Yeah,
this story was
no.
not serious in the least, and I like it. But...
Not at all. Not at all. So let's kind of examine it a little bit. So you're right. I provided the initial inspiration or outline for the story.
Right.
And, it was just one of those things that I can't even remember what was it that triggered it. Maybe it was the line from the Christmas song, "You Better Watch Out." Okay. What is it? Santa Claus is coming to town, right?
Right.
Okay. So, in my twisted little head, I think of, Santa Claus is coming to town, and I watched the Bass and Rankin, or however you say their names.
Rankin Bass.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cartoons and animations, and it's all jolly and friendly and fun, but still,
Stop motion animation.
Yes, very happy. And then in my twisted little head, I think Santa Claus is coming to town. Santa Claus is coming to town. Santa Claus is coming to town, bitch.
All right, Vince McMahon. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I think of it that way, and then the mobster idea kicks in. So we've played with AI a little bit here.
Right.
And we came up with the theme song that we used for the second half of the season.
Yes.
And, monsters coming down the hall, and all that kind of stuff.
I loved it.
Yes, a lot of fun. So we revisited the whole AI thing for the theme song for this episode. Mm-hmm. But also, as you can probably tell as a listener, all three of them that are out there could probably tell it wasn't my voice or Derek's luscious tones. It was somebody else, and it wasn't a real person. At least I don't think it was a real person, but it was AI reading the story for us, which we totally pirated. But we're going to make amends on that in season 3 if we get something's lined up. So, but our pirate ways will soon be over.
And it was a great sounding voice, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh. I was telling you before that when I started with this, Santa Claus is coming to town, and it's kind of a crime gritty kind of thing. I was thinking of my favorite author, which is Elmore Leonard. And of course, he's known for writing crime novels, also Westerns. But, I got into the crime novels more than the Westerns. And then in the 90s, late 90s, early aughts, I guess you'd say, I was listening to books on tape when they were actually on tape. They were on cassettes.
Right.
And, you go to the library and you take home a suitcase full of cassettes for one novel.
Mhm.
And, you'd have to, hopefully you didn't drop them and get them all out of order, because that would be like an all day project, putting those things back in order. But you'd listen to the tapes and somebody would be reading the book. And there was this famous guy, and I'm going to have to look up his name, because I got to give the guy props, because he's no longer with us, and I just feel an obligation to call him out.
And the voice was very much in kind of a classic kind of sound, kind of tone, even though it wasn't an older person. It was probably someone actually younger than us, but just has a really good voice. So while you're looking there, I'm going to kind of banter here.
Please.
I like that it was well, like I was telling you, and we've had communication between writing the story, and with that type of thing, when you have a voice that's reading your information, your story, you kind of write to that voice. And I was thinking of things when I was working on the second part with you about the way the person would read it and things like that. We did changes, we did adjustments, which is fine. But as far as it sounded, I think it sounded great. And that voice, be it real or manufactured, I know it's AI, but I mean, be it a real voice or a manufactured one, it did give a lot of credence.
Yes,
true word, to the
gravitas.
Yeah,
gravitas. The guy's name is Frank Muller. Okay. And listening to Frank Muller read Elmore Leonard was just icing on the cake, because Frank could reach deep down and get gritty, and Elmore Leonard's books were gritty. They were funny too, and Frank could pull off funny. And so when I heard this AI voice reading my version of a gritty crime novel, at least at the beginning, I was just, I had to sit down and cover myself with a pillow, because it was just amazing.
Clutch your pearls.
Yes, I clutched my pearls a lot that day. Wow, we went really someplace dark. But yeah, I was just so excited. Probably didn't need to say that. So happy about this reading, and I was so glad that we kind of went this path with the grittiness and the crime thing. Although I got to be honest, Derek is an idea factory, and he had tons of ideas that could have whipped this thing into a 5-part, novel that would have rivaled Lord of the Rings.
Wow. Well, thank you. But I want to say about this is that I kind of took over a little bit. Lawrence actually began doing the story and set us up for a really good story. I think we had kind of an ending, but not for sure. So kind of behind the scenes here, I took the first portion, I took both fight scenes to a point.
Yeah.
But the first one in the warehouse is something I went and I really wanted to elaborate on those elves, and I wanted to make them crazy and creepy, and I wanted Santa to be a badass, and I wanted the weapons to be Christmas related.
Yes.
So I think we did really well with that, with your touch-ups. And,
you nailed it.
Going there. Well, thank you.
You nailed it. Between the creepiness of the elves and how you incorporated all the Christmassy weapons,
Yes, I see a possible Christmas-themed serial killer story in our future with different weapons, but we'll just keep that to ourselves for now.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, so and then we switched off. I took the story where they would meet up with Santa again, and I kind of took it a little further, gave it to Lawrence as ideas, basically, and kind of a thought process. He took it from there and summed it up, and took a lot of my stuff and then added a lot of good stuff. And yeah, I think it turned out really well. I listened to the final of it a little bit ago again, and I was like, if we would have went with what I had, it would have at least been a 50-minute story. But I'm glad that it was shortened to the point that it made sense. It gave it an ending. However, there is a lot of information in that kind of realm that I think we can possibly integrate next time.
Right. And again, the parts that you wrote where you were writing most of the action with the fight scenes and the confrontation with Santa and all that, I was reading it and I wanted so much to, as I'm doing my little tweaks and
Mm-hmm.
and edits and things. I wanted so much to preserve the insanity
Oh yeah.
of what you were doing. I mean, and not that you're insane, but I'm saying
No, I
the
get it.
tone of the story just went off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Santa, I mean, it was like he was a rock star, or he
Yeah.
was just dancing around. For a minute there, I thought you were implying that he was not only drinking, but he was on cocaine and, you know, all this kind
No,
of stuff.
not that much. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I could have easily
Oh
seen
yeah.
that as
Oh
part
yeah.
of the character. And I was just like, wow, man, we really messed Santa up in this.
Well, I think that we have decided, and you did it last year by doing the last season's Christmas episode,
Mhm.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, right.
You kind of took Santa, which movies have been doing it and people have been doing it to a new level of not just being this jolly guy, kind
Sure.
of being this superhero guy, kind of being this dark dude, whatever like that. I
Right.
think that from this point on, the Shade Chronicles is going to be a place where Santa gets crazy.
Right.
And
Right.
because we got a lot of ideas, and it's a fictitious person. We're not
Sure.
talking about anything that, if someone is upset about it, that's fine. But the
Well,
thing is that he's a
yeah.
fictitious person, and I think there's a lot of lore to him that people don't
Yes.
understand that's not really pretty. However,
Sure.
that's for another time and more stories.
And I got to be completely transparent here because this is not unique to us, what we did
Right.
with this story. I remember as a kid, and I'm trying to remember the exact publication that did this. I don't remember if it was in Heavy Metal. You remember Heavy Metal, the magazine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, loved it.
Or Epic, the Marvel
Oh, Epic's version. Yeah.
of Heavy Metal, or if it was Marvel Fanfare, which was kind of a special
Hmm.
publication that they did, or they even did
Right.
other publications outside of the normal comic
Hmm.
code approved 32-page comics that they would do.
Right.
And I remember reading a couple of Santa Claus stories in those comics that were exactly in the same tone
Hmm.
of
Right.
what we did. Something,
Yeah.
it's a horror story basically jammed into a Christmas story.
I just wanted to sum up by saying this episode, being the
Yes.
final one, I'm glad that we collaborated on it. I think it worked out really well. When I want to do, and we will discuss that, but I'm going to do more in
Sure.
the future, kind of collaboration type of things.
As long as
But
my prescriptions hold out, I'm all for
okay,
it.
that works. But yeah, I just wanted to just sum it up and say it was a good time. I'm glad we did it. It was a good experiment and it was a great
Yes.
success. And I think it's something that shows that we both can kind of be creative together and have our different thoughts, but then kind of blend them together and it really worked well.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate, honestly, no bullshit here.
Hmm?
I appreciate how generous you were to allow me to be my neurotic self.
Oh
Okay.
well, I don't think you were, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I explained it to you this way
Hmm.
that I feel like I have to create these little connective tissues that go from point A to point B to point C, whether, you might already, I mean, everyone else might see the points, but
Hmm.
for me, sometimes I'm just so anal about it that I have well, how did Santa get the sleigh?
Right. No,
And
it makes sense.
why
You
do
had
the
to do that.
reindeer
Yeah.
fly? And I mean, I have to
Yeah.
answer all these questions in my head.
Oh
And
yeah.
so you were very patient with that
And I took
in this
advantage of that
process.
because I wasn't worried about connecting at that point. I was just wanting to jump in and make a fun scene and get the hell out, and that's what I did.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah, it makes
you're
sense.
like, hey, watch him do this. Hey,
Yeah.
Lawrence, I'm gonna throw a clown in there with a dragon. What? What? How could you possibly put a dragon
Connect
in?
it. Connect it.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I
connect it,
got it.
buddy.
Yeah. That was fun. That was fun. I thank you for that.
Yes. Well, so now we can say that we can safely and happily close the book on season 2. Looking forward to the future before we get to season 3,
Hmm.
which is out there, maybe a little further out than we know, but it is out there. We're talking about some projects, at least one project for sure,
Hmm.
that we're going to try to pull together and possibly launch before we get back into doing a regular podcast for season 3. Would you like to tell them what it's about?
Yes. We are going to take season 1 and season 2, I believe, correct? Together?
Yes. Yes.
And we are going to combine them into a regular old book with
Yes.
the images from the podcast.
Yep.
The stories edited, fixed. That sound a lot better than whatever we wrote and read. So it's better for whenever someone wants to read it. And we're going
Right.
to make that available. And you're actually working on a lot of that right now.
Yeah. And we're probably about 2/3 of the way through the assembly of that book.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things that we still have to produce, but all the stories are written.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be a very nice size volume in terms of content. When you take into consideration, it's going to feature all of season 1 and season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got that going. And then it's just now we're kind of in the weeds doing the editing, doing the fine tuning. We're tightening up some things. And I know in my case, as I'm going through some of my stories, I'm like, when I did that the first time, this particular story, there was something I left out, or maybe something I forgot to add, or a point that I should have stressed more that would have made the story make a little more sense. So I'm massaging those things as I'm going through and helping to make the story better. So in a lot of ways, what you're going to see in the book is an enhanced version of what we provided on the podcast. And I know in one instance for sure, like the last episode with Apocalypse, a love story, there was parts of it that I had cut for time because the story was just going on and on and on as I tend to do. And I was like, he's going to kill me. Derek's going to be like, what the fuck, man? Is this over an hour? We can't have something over an hour. It's not like the 3 fans are going to, be upset with us, but still, if we want anybody else to listen to it, it's got to be under an hour. So I cut some things, took some things out, minor things, but still I felt they were important enough to put into the novelized version of the story. So
no, I like
we'll see those. We'll see those back in there. So it's not like the same product. You get something a little newer, a little more vibrant, a little bit more enhanced. Than it was. A better
version to a point, or a different version to a point of what you've heard on the podcast.
Exactly. So then the next part, or the next thing that we needed to discuss, was season 3 and some thoughts that we had about it. Now, we tried this at the end of season 1, and we didn't really get any takers. And I think some of that had to do with, in my explanation of what I was asking for, I was expecting to have everything done and people submitting things to us that I wouldn't have to do any work. But in reality, I realized that people who write stories may not have all the talents that we have in terms of audio production and having the technical expertise to edit something like that and put it together. So what we're going to put out there again, and we're going to make a big push for this, is we are going to ask for people out there to submit their stories. And in this case, instead of having a fully produced audio file, we are just looking for stories, text stories. There are plenty of writers out there. I know you're out there. I've seen all the websites, seen all the Facebook pages. I know you people are out there. And I know that your stories are just sitting there waiting for someone to want them. So we want them. And we will do something with them. When you send us your story, if we accept it, we will produce it in an audio format. We'll get one of our AI boys to read it. And we'll put sound effects to it. And we'll put music to it. We'll tighten it up where it needs to be tightened up if that's necessary. And then we'll let you approve it before we do that. So if you are willing to send us your story, we'll do all that for you just so you can be a part of the Shade Chronicles.
Agreed. Yes, I think it would be a great idea to have some other stories come out, even though you and I are pretty vast in what we like to talk about in the sense of our stories and things like that. We do have our
Right.
styles, and it'd be nice to mix up some other styles. And I think this whole project from the beginning of Shade Chronicles, it was to be something that we wanted to share the kind of stuff we had, but we realized we want to kind of be an outlet for others to use in a sense to get this stuff out, our stuff out.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that's going to be beneficial to all of us. If we had a few people that would do that throughout the season, that would be great. We'd like to have them part of have this little package of this
Right.
audio, this story that they can use, and they can have others hear that that's their work,
Right.
and that's pretty good.
Yeah, if you're writing stories and producing them, and publishing them on Amazon, and you are hitting the bestseller list, or you've got a lot of income coming in, you're probably not our guy.
Right.
But if you're the guy who's sitting there in your mother's basement and you're typing away and you're like, someday they're going to appreciate me, then we want to talk to you, Cowboy.
This is an ad for asking people for stuff, right? Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Yes,
we
I
want to
agree.
talk to you, Cowboy, because
That's right.
you're ready to ride with us.
You're like us.
Exactly. We did move out of our mother's basements, but she's still
We've
in our
got a new
hearts.
basement, and that's in another woman's house. But anyway,
I am actually sitting in my basement right now as I
so
talk to you.
So
Yes,
am I.
there you go. So you see, you can take the boy out of the basement, but you can't take the basement out of the boy. So
That sounds so wrong on so many levels. Anyway, why do they got boys in the basement? Anyway.
Well, and get your special socks out. So
All right, stop. We got to end this.
Yes, we do.
We only got the room for a few more minutes here, sir. They're going to kick us out.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, we're going to make a big push for that. But if you happen to be listening to this podcast and you feel like you want to get the jump on it, send anything that you want to contribute to our email, which is shadechron@gmail.com, which is SHADECHRON@gmail.com. And if you can't remember that, go to theshadechronicles.com, which is our website, and you can find a way to contact us through that. Or search for us on Facebook, and you can find us there, and you can send us a message, and then we can arrange for you to send us your manuscript. What we're looking for, just technically, so we want sci-fi, we want horror, and it could, if you've listened to our podcast, sometimes we're heavy into that, sometimes we're just flirting around and not being too serious about it. So we'll look at everything. But if you will stay within, say, 2,000 to 5,000 words in your manuscript, that would probably be about the right amount of time for an episode, or for a story in an episode, especially if we try to feature 2 stories per episode.
Right. And I think that another thing we need to maybe talk about, and you can kind of, also say, is that, we throw the F-bombs out there. We use cursing. We use whatever like that. Not a problem with that. Don't want it to be fully, that's all it is. And we also probably do not want anything that's like, really the real weird in a sense of sexual stuff or torture porn or any of that crazy stuff. We don't necessarily want to dabble in that. But as we get violent. We have our violent situations. I got a couple stories I want to do for next year that are going to be even more horror related, that are going to be a little bit violent, but still.
Okay, now I'm scared.
Nothing over the top. No, you'll be fine.
If you think of Stephen King, you think of Stephen Kuntz, you think of I'm blanking now. Help me out.
Dean Kuntz.
Dean Kuntz. I'm sorry, I kept using Stephen
King. You're good.
Yeah. Dean Kuntz, Stephen King. Who's the guy? Escape from New York.
John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. I think John Carpenter, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, rated R. Let's not get really weird. Okay, nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to know how creepy you are.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm hoping we do this, but I was gonna say, tell a story. Try to tell a story. Keep it with that connectiveness that Lawrence likes to talk about, that I apparently missed at times. But keep that together. Keep it together. Keep a good story, and then you can add your little flavors of what you like in there and go from there.
It's all about a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, we reserve the right to reject anything and everything that we don't like.
Right. And then we also
Yes.
may reserve the right to say, hey, what about changing this or
Yeah,
this?
sure.
And then if they want to, great. If not, thank you for
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
for sure.
I think that would be something up to us.
Yes. So at this point, we probably should say our goodbyes.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening, all three of you. And I don't know why I'm fixated on three. I got
2
something
seasons. All right.
Yes, 2 seasons in the can, as they say. And so, with that, any New Year's resolutions, Derek?
Just do a lot of writing so I don't have to wait till the last minute next year.
God, I would appreciate that.
I know you would. I know.
Yes. I'll hold you to it.
I know.
Yes. And for me, I just want to try to be a better writer and a better artist and a better person because, my wife's getting a little sick of it. So anyway, for the Shade Chronicles, I'm Lawrence Trokey.
I am Derek Leftridge.
And we both wish you the bestest of Christmases and happiestest of New Year's.
I say the same without all the ises.
Yes. Well, I've been drinking a little bit, so you know.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah.
Happy Christmas, Merry New Year.
That's it. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to the Shade Chronicles. For comments or inquiries, you can contact us at shadechron@gmail.com. That's SHADECHRON@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also get more information at theshadechronicles.com. The Shade Chronicles podcast is the creative property of Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey. Stories in this podcast were the sole creation of Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey, respectively. Any attempt to replay for broadcast or distribution portions of any episode of the Shade Chronicles without the prior written consent from the creators and/or significant compensation is strictly prohibited. Shame on you for even thinking about it in the first place. Thanks again for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of the Shade Chronicles.